All right, folks, welcome back to the show. How many times have we heard, especially lately, and from the President of the United States, that the debate is over, that the science is settled, that climate change, they don't call it global warming much anymore, but climate change is done. It is settled, science, it's done, the debate is over. But of course, there are hundreds and thousands of scientists and climatologists and weathermen and meteorologists and others who dispute that. But the president and others would have you think that they're, crazy and they're, as Al Gore termed them, deniers. Anyway, we have a great new book out by a gentleman named Rupert Darwall, London-based expert in energy and climate policy. The book is The Age of Global Warming, A History. And we welcome Rupert to the studio. Thanks. Nice to see you.
Joining you.
All right. So when you hear the President of the United States, let's start with him, announce at the, I don't know if it was the State of the Union first time or whatever this year, and say that there is no debate. It's over. What goes through your mind?
Well, there is a truth in that because politics settled the science. And in 1992, over 190 nations signed the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, which essentially said mankind is interfering with the climate. And in 1996, at a big climate conference in Geneva, government representatives said that mankind was that carbon emissions would lead to dangerous anthropogenic interference in the climate system. So it's the politicians and it's politics that settle the science. Of course, science is all, the real science is an open question because we don't know how much the Earth will warm with a doubling of carbon dioxide.
Well, no, okay, but it's not a proven fact, obviously, that man influences the climate or global warming.
You're absolutely right. No one knows by how much increased levels of carbon dioxide cause the atmosphere to warm. And when you look at the climate models, they have had a terrible predictive record. They completely missed the 15 to 17 year pause in global temperatures that we're now seeing.
Now, that's a key fact, which the real deniers to me are the people who won't admit that or deny that or cover that up. The global warming, hysteria that we lived through from, I guess with Al Gore on through till right now, until it started getting cold, and now they call it climate change and not global warming. But the Earth has stopped warming for the past 17 years. And it was in the 70s that we had the Time magazine and Newsweek and all that, the headlines, the magazine covers were the coming ice age. So, I mean, they can't get it straight. Isn't it just cyclical?
I don't know what is happening with the climate or what will happen with the climate. But the truth is, climate scientists don't either. And what they've got are climate models that make projections, and these climate models have run too hot. And the crucial question for them to answer is, by what year, if the climate hasn't bounced back to the trend predicted by the climate models, when will they say, well, actually, we got this wrong? That, for them, is the question that they don't answer.
But they'll never say that because there's too much riding on it. A lot of people think that it's an industry. It's a cottage industry. It's a conspiracy. It's the carbon tax that they want to impose upon the whole world. People make money off of that. There are companies that will, that Al Gore allegedly was invested in that would have made fortunes off of carbon credits and all that nonsense. You could be a millionaire. You could have a corporate jet. You could have a boat. You could have a carbon footprint a zillion times the average person. But if you buy a carbon credit, you're relieved of your duty or you're relieved of your guilt. I mean, it's insane. So do you ever see the movement saying, we were wrong, I just don't see it?
But there's an even more powerful piece of evidence as to why doing all the decarbonisation is literally insane. And that is the big emerging economies absolutely refuse to sign up to a global treaty that hinders their ability to grow their economies and pump out carbon dioxide.
Right.
And that's not speculation. We're not speculating.
No, they
won't
do it.
They said that in 2009 at Copenhagen.
And they're the worst offenders.
And they are now the biggest emitters
Yeah.
of carbon dioxide. So whatever happens in the United States, it doesn't matter if the rest of if the big emerging economies continue if they don't sign on. And that is the biggest denial of reality going on in this debate.
How wrong was Al Gore? I mean, Al Gore predicted that within 10 years, 5 years, how high the seas would rise. And I mean, he got, I don't have it on the top of my head, and I don't expect you to, but he got specific, and he was, causing a panic, and he was dead wrong.
Well, at the Bali Climate Conference, which was in 2007, lucky him going to Bali, but he predicted that the Arctic sea ice would disappear in the summer by around about now, 2014,
right.
2015.
Right.
He also, in his movie, An Inconvenient Truth, he said, the Greenland ice sheet is going to melt and that will cause a new ice age in Europe. What he didn't tell anyone is that the melting, if it happens, of the Greenland ice sheet isn't in decades or centuries, it's millennia. It's the earliest it would melt is in 1,000 years' time. Why didn't he say that?
Well, that whole movie, in England, a couple of parents sued, and the courts in England said that if a teacher wants to show it in schools, you probably know this better than I, in the UK, they have to announce that they have to point out, I think, 11 or 12 fallacies in the movie, in the documentary. So that whole thing to me was just a sham. I want to read you something here, and this I guess won't surprise you, or maybe it will. A professor with Rochester Institute of Technology has called for the incarceration of any American who actively disagrees that climate change is solely caused by human activity. The guy's name is Lawrence Torsello, philosophy professor with a PhD from the University at Buffalo. He published the comments as part of an essay submitted to the academic website The Conversation. He says that malignant individuals who do not identify are collectively organizing a campaign funding misinformation about climate change, and he suggests that such activity ought to be considered criminally negligent. Now, is this an aberration, or could we expect more of this kind of nonsense?
I think it also answers the question you first asked about the science being settled. If the science were genuinely settled, you wouldn't have any of this. But the fact that people who are strong believers in anthropogenic global warming resort to that kind of thing, and I really would like to know what kind of philosophy can produce that absurd idea of prosecuting people for speaking their minds and testing a scientific proposition. I think it does show that the idea of global warming is, if you like, in the decay phase of its life cycle. But the other thing is that it is the idea that what skeptics have done or casting doubt on the science has had any effect on the position of the big Western governments, I think is completely unhistorical. They have all pushed for carbon caps, and as we just discussed, it's the Chinese and the Indians who have put a stop on it. Yeah. And really, if he's got a beef, it shouldn't be with climate skeptics or people questioning the science in the West.
The biggest offenders.
He should go to Beijing and try it out there.
All right. Explain to me how there's any case left. We have a minute and a half left. Yeah. How's there any case for global warming that anybody could believe it after the winter we just went through in this country and record-setting lows that come back from the 20s? The temperatures haven't been so low since the 20s. And by the way, we have record-setting highs sometimes that also broke the record set in 1920. Well, how could it have been so hot in 1920? There wasn't all this carbon monoxide or whatever and carbon footprint. So explain to me how, but let's stick to the cold weather. How can anybody still believe after this winter?
I think that the really interesting thing about the science is that you have to ask yourself, what evidence would disprove this hypothesis? And what we're seeing is, well, they say, well, a record cold shows that doesn't disprove it. A 15 to 17 years
of no warming, that doesn't disprove it.
But so the question that people who believe, the scientists who are making this case should answer is, what evidence in principle would falsify the hypothesis?
Yeah, and I fear their answer would be nothing. The book, The Age of Global Warming, A History, Rupert Darwall, and folks, it's all in here, everything to get your blood boiling and to educate you at the same time. And Rupert, great to see you. Thanks for coming in. Good luck with the book. All right, folks, we're coming back with Give Me Five right here on the Steve Malzberg Show on Newsmax Television. Don't go away. I like the little music. You like the little music in the background? Maybe we should try that all the time. We're coming right back. Don't go away.
The Steve Malzberg Show.